Today, we're tackling something that's quickly becoming just as vital as, reading or writing. We're talking about coding education for children. It's a huge topic, and we're going to dive right in. Our main source for this is a really excellent guide. It's very detailed and aims squarely at parents. It's called Empowering Futures: Why Children Should Learn Coding. It's just packed with insights, some powerful quotes, and really practical advice. So, our mission today for you is to kind of cut through all the noise. We want to pull out the key ideas, the most important nuggets, really, to help you understand why coding is now seen as, well, as foundational as math, science, or English, and maybe even more importantly, what concrete steps you can actually take. Think of this as a quick way to get thoroughly up to speed on a really vital subject.
Okay, so maybe let's start with the basis. What is coding? Because I think it can sound a bit, well, intimidating. The guide we're using puts it quite simply. It's the process of giving instructions to a computer to perform specific tasks. Basically, it's the language behind, well, pretty much everything digital. Your phone, websites,
Right,
games.
even AI and smart TVs.
Exactly. It's sort of the invisible engine making it all work, telling the devices what to do.
That's a great starting point. So, if that's what coding is, how does the guide connect that immediately to things like logical thinking and problem solving for kids? What's happening there?
Well, what's really interesting is how the act of coding itself trains the brain. The source really emphasizes that it enhances logical thinking and problem solving.
Hmm.
And it does this by forcing kids to do something critical, break down big problems.
Into smaller chunks.
Precisely. Smaller, manageable parts, they learn to spot patterns, think in steps, in a sequence. And this isn't just about the tech skill itself. It's about developing this fundamental way of thinking, systems thinking, really.
Hmm.
So from early on, they're learning to sort of deconstruct things, figure out what's going wrong, and build solutions logically. That's a skill that applies everywhere, right? School projects, managing pocket money, anything.
That's the real power, isn't it? The underlying thinking framework. Yeah, that is powerful. It actually reminds me of that Steve Jobs quote: "Everyone should learn how to program a computer because it teaches you how to think."
Exactly. It's the process that matters.
So how does that type of logical thinking, that process, how does that feed into, say, doing better in school generally, academic?
Well, the guide draws a direct line there. It points out how this logical foundation, it actually improves math and reading skills. Think about it. Concepts like variables or sequences or if-then logic.
Yeah.
When kids use those in coding, they're flexing the same mental muscles they need for math problems or even understanding the structure of a story.
Oh,
So it's not isolated. You got to boost their core academic skills, too.
that makes a lot of sense. It connects things up. But, okay, beyond logic, what about creativity? Because I think a lot of people still see coding as very rigid, very, left brain. How does the guide address that?
That's a really common view, and the guide actually pushes back quite strongly. It makes the point that coding significantly boosts creativity. How? By shifting kids from just consuming content, playing games, watching videos, to actually creating it.
Ah, right, the creator versus consumer idea.
Exactly. And the source has a lovely phrase for it. Like art or music, coding is a form of expression.
Mm.
So instead of just playing a game, maybe your child designs one. A simple one, maybe.
Or an animation.
Or an animation or a basic app, a website, maybe even making a little robot move. These are all creative outlets. And importantly, many tools now use visual coding. Think Scratch Junior, Blockly.
Where they drag and drop blocks.
Exactly. Drag and drop commands. It makes it really intuitive, visually engaging, and fun, even for younger kids. No need for complex typing at first.
That visual element is key, I think. It lowers that barrier to entry you mentioned.
Yeah.
Now, through that creative process, I'm guessing there's a fair bit of trial and error involved.
Absolutely.
Does the guide talk about how that builds things like confidence or maybe resilience? Because it must get frustrating sometimes.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
And that's a benefit that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. Building confidence and resilience. Look, coding hardly ever works right the first time. It just doesn't.
Right.
So it's inherently a process of figuring things out, finding where the instructions went wrong. Kids learn to debug, which is just a fancy word for fixing mistakes, and then try again.
And again?
Probably. And maybe again. Yes. And that cycle, trying, failing, adjusting, succeeding eventually, it built huge amounts of patience and persistence. And when they finally make it work, that feeling is incredibly empowering, builds real confidence.
Yeah, that aha moment.
Exactly. And that resilience is crucial for, well, for life, isn't it? Not just coding.
So true. It's that perseverance muscle. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about the future. The guide really hammers home this point that coding prepares for the future. And there's a statistic in there that, frankly, jumped out at me. By 2030, over 80% of jobs will require some knowledge of technology.
80%, that's huge.
It's staggering. And notice it says some knowledge of technology. It's not just pure tech roles, it's most jobs. And the document basically says coding is becoming a basic skill just like reading and writing. It's not really optional anymore. It makes me think of what Barack Obama said quite directly.
Oh, yes.
Don't just play on your phone, program it. It's that shift, again, from passive user to active creator.
And that idea, it's echoed by so many big names in tech and beyond, which really underlines how important this is seen to be. The guide quotes Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, predicting, in 15 years, we'll be teaching programming just like reading and writing. That's a fundamental shift in literacy.
15 years, that's not far off.
Not at all. And Sundar Pichai from Google stresses how it helps kids solve problems and think logically. Bill Gates is quoted, too, saying it stretches your mind. Okay. And Obama, again, linking these skills not just to personal futures, but to the country's future. It's seen as that fundamental.
Wow. Okay. Those are some serious endorsements. It really drives home that this isn't just, a fun hobby. Which brings us back to that idea of coding alongside the core subjects, not instead of, but with them. How does the guide explain the practical connections? How does coding link subjects together?
That's a key part of the argument. The guide talks about how coding connects all subjects practically. So imagine using math concepts to keep score in a game they're building.
Right.
Or using storytelling skills to create an interactive animation. It makes abstract ideas really concrete. And this ties into a bigger point the source makes about coding, making your child a creator, not just a learner.
Active participation.
Exactly. And it naturally encourages project-based learning, which, as you know, is a big focus in modern education. Learning by doing, by building something. In fact, the guide mentions a specific policy change in India, the NEP 2020.
The new education policy.
That's the one. It actually recommends introducing coding from class 6 onwards, specifically pushing for that project-based approach.
So it's actually being written into educational policy now.
It shows just how mainstream and fundamental this is becoming.
Okay, that's a huge validation. So with all that said, the big question for you listening is probably, okay, what do I actually do? And the good news is our guide is very practical. It gives some really clear, actionable steps. Let's maybe run through a few. One obvious one it suggests is enrolling your child in coding classes. Could be online, could be in person. That gives structure.
Definitely. And if maybe classes aren't feasible right away, the guide also points to educational apps. We mentioned Scratch Junior, Blockly, Tinker earlier. These are great starting points, often free or low cost and very visual.
Yeah, those block-based ones seem really accessible.
They really are.
The guide also talks about reframing screen time, allowing it for productive coding activities, not just passive consumption, shifting that mindset.
That's a good one. And another tip is getting involved together. Attend coding events, robotics fairs, school STEM nights.
STEM being science, technology, engineering, math.
Right, making it a family thing shows support and makes it more exciting, shows them the possibilities.
And I like this one. Celebrate their small projects. Even a tiny bit of code that makes something happen. Treat it with the same pride you would a drawing or a story they wrote. That encouragement is huge.
Absolutely vital. And finally, it suggests plugging into school programs if they exist. Coding clubs, STEM initiatives, being part of that community helps.
So a lot of practical ideas there. As you're listening, maybe think about which of those resonates most with you, which one feels like a good first step for your family.
And just to bring it all together, to really reiterate the core message from this deep dive, the guide we've been exploring concludes with a really powerful thought. It says, coding is today's literacy. Just as we teach our children to read and write, we must also teach them how to code.
It's simple but profound, isn't it? That idea of modern literacy. The guide suggests that giving your child this gift, the gift of coding, it's like giving them the power to create their own future. It's about empowerment, creativity, logic, and just being prepared for the world they're growing into. So let me leave you with this thought. If coding truly is today's literacy, what does that really mean? What are the bigger implications? Maybe not just for kids, but for education systems everywhere, or even for adults who feel like they've missed the boat. What stands out most to you about this shift? Definitely something to think about.